I am not gonna lie. The yarn you work with for the Jasmine Stitch is super important. Getting nice and full petals and small flower centers, if you use the wrong yarn, is gonna be super hard. But the good news is that if you choose the right yarn, working the Jasmine Stitch is so much easier. So my name is Makalani. I'm here to help you crack the code and fall in love with the Jasmine Stitch. And today we're gonna talk about choosing the perfect yarn for the Jasmine Stitch and also how you can adapt the stitch so that you can use yarn you already have. If you are totally new to the Jasmine Stitch, I recommend that you check out my video from last week where I show you in detail how to work the Jasmine Stitch back and forth. It's by far the easiest way to learn, and I've linked to the video in the description below. Okay, I know you are ready to talk about yarn, so let's dive right in. I very often use blown yarns. This is Drops Design Air, and blown yarns are very, very light. As you can see here, the structure is kind of different. It's very thick, but if you squeeze it, it goes completely flat. The reason this is important is that when you use yarn such as this, you get very full and nice petals, but the flower centers get really small. Because in these flower centers, there are lots and lots of loops of yarn coming together. If the yarn does not compress, your flower center will get pretty big. So that is why I recommend using yarn that looks and feel thick, but goes very flat when you press it. If you try a more traditional cotton yarn, you might experience that when you press it, it really doesn't change that much. You can still feel it pretty thick between your fingers. Getting beautiful jasmine stitches with this kind of yarn is really hard. Here I want to show you another example. This is like super thick and chunky yarn, but when you squeeze it, it completely disappears. So that's going to give really nice and full petals and very small flower centers. Don't worry so much about going shopping or about the specific brand of yarn, but go have a look in your stash. See if you can find something that is thick, but goes very flat when you press it. And try that out. I want to recommend that you try out yarn with different levels of fluff. Like here, I'm working with 2 strands of yarn held together, one of the mohair, and the fluff of the mohair gives super full stitches without the work getting heavy. However, keep in mind that if you're working with yarn that has too much fluff, the gorgeous jasmine structure can become totally hidden and you can't really see it. Another thing that's super important is to not use yarn that is loosely twisted. When you work the Jasmine Stitch, you have a lot of loops on your hook at the same time. And if you work with yarn that is loosely twisted, it will split. This is gonna lead to your hook getting stuck a lot, and it's super frustrating, so just don't do that. Before we move on to the tips I have for how you can adapt the stitch to the yarn you have in your stash, I want to remind you to like this video and to subscribe to my channel and turn on the little notification bell. I have a lot of jasmine goodies coming your way, so you really don't want to miss out. Let's dive in and cover how you can adapt the Jasmine Stitch so that you can use yarn you already have at home. There are multiple ways of adapting the stitch, and the first one I want to show you is related to the length you pull the loops up to. So if you are working with chunky yarn that really builds well, you can pull the loops longer. I want you to really pay attention when you're doing this, because getting the loops to the same height, especially when it's a height that's new to you, is going to take some effort. So when you start a new project, really focus on the length you are pulling the loops up to. So as you can see here, we're going to get much bigger flower this way. And of course, this is going to affect the stitch tension, so you need to take that into account as well. If you want to work with yarn that is thinner than the yarn you usually work with, you can pull the loops shorter. Then you get super small, tiny flowers. Here's an example where I've pulled the loops really, really long to get chunky look. And here are a few examples. A little Christmas tree where I've pulled the loops short. I've used thinner yarn to make this keychain with super small flowers. Another way to adapt the stitch is to change the number of loops that each petal consists of. If you are working with yarn that is thinner than you normally do, you can actually increase the times that you yarn over and pull up a loop on each petal. You can do it 1 more time or 2 more times on each petal. That way, Each petal is gonna be built of more loops and your work is gonna get more chunky. As you can see, the petals that we build are super full and you're not gonna get see-through work. If you instead want your work to be lighter, you can yarn over and pull up a loop only once on each petal. This is going to give you super light work, super light flowers. You can see through them. And this could be really pretty, for instance, for a shawl or if you're working with mohair. Another way to get fuller stitches and a more chunky work is to work with 2 strands of yarn held together. Then you can work with the standard number of loops on a hook for each petal and you can still get thicker work. That's it! Now you know how to choose the perfect yarn for your jasmine project and also how to adapt the stitch to suit the yarn that you already have at home. And I want to encourage you that every time you start a new jasmine project, you should try out a few different yarn types and also try adapting the stitch in a few different ways. And then you find the combination that you really love. If you have any comments or questions, I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below. Also, check out my Etsy and Ravelry stores via the links below. There you can find lots and lots of jasmine patterns, perfect for putting your new skills to use. I hope this is useful to you guys. Thank you so much for using my videos to learn. And until next time, happy jasmine stitching!